let's revisit target and current target in order to understand the difference, which is a common source of confusion among beginners in JavaScript. And let's see, let's put this question here. So target versus, or in contrast with current target. So I will just have to sketch this a bit. So we have this element and we have, let's say, this element, and let's create another one, button. So whenever we assign listeners to elements, so for example, whenever I want to listen for a certain event on this red element, and if this is, let's say, a body element or some other element, still the same. So if I want to detect when some kind of event passes through this element on the bubbling phase, I attach an event listener. And of course, the syntax is sorry. What happened? Wait. Document body add event listener. And let's say click function so we have, let's say, something. Okay, I will. And this is how we attach an event listener. Okay, to this element. And we say, so in this way, we say whenever a click event, I will use like the same, for example, I will create something like this, and I will say capture phase, because the event will happen on the capturing phase as well as on the bubbling phase, on the same element. So I need to make a distinction when exactly I want the listener to work, here or here. By default, as we said, the event listener listens on the event on the bubbling phase. So whenever the click event happens here, this function will be called. Okay. So what is target and what is current target? So the current target, I think it's easier to see it this way. The current target is always this section, the element attached to the event listener. Okay? So no matter where I click or where the event initially got triggered and then it bubbled through to the body, the event current target inside an event handler will always be the element that has the event listener. And this means that when we click here, we're going to have a click here. I will say click, then we go here, then we go here, then we go to the bubbling phase. So click, click, click. the event propagation starts going this way, right? And out of the. So once the event hits the body on the bubbling phase, so on the bubbling phase, we have a click event on the body, which has a listener. So this function will get executed. Inside this function, this event handler function, the event current target, or E target, because I use the E here, will always be the document body, will always be this element attached to the listener. Okay? I think current target is simpler than target. The target, let's use a different color here. The target will be something that's not so stable, let's say, or like current target. Current target can be this element, or this element, or even this element. The target is the element that we clicked on. So we can click here, we can click here, we can click here. The event target can be any of these three elements. All these three elements will trigger the event propagation. All three elements will at some point reach the body and um, fill the click event here on the bubbling phase. So this event listener will always get triggered no matter where we click. Okay, and inside the event handler, the event.target will be the element that initially triggered this process. So event target is always the element that triggered the event initially. It can be any element. The event current target is always this element, the one that is listening on some kind of event on the bubbling phase. So let me know if you have any questions on this, and if this makes it a little bit more clear. So let's go here. Let's have Elvis with us. Hello, Elvis. So target and event target. Let's download this. Okay. And go back to our next question or thing we want to clear, which is why we shouldn't be using the on-click in this fashion. So there are multiple reasons why we shouldn't be using this. So as you know, we can go to an element and say on click, I don't know, run something. Now, inside the HTML, the reason we try to avoid using this syntax is because we try to keep things clear. We try to stay in this, this is called, sometimes we can, it's referred to as separation of concerns. We really want HTML to be responsible for HTML. We really want the .html files to have markup or HTML. We don't want JavaScript or even CSS to live inside the HTML. Whenever we want to change the HTML, we want to go to an HTML file. Whenever we want to deal with CSS, we open a CSS file. Whenever we want to deal with JavaScript code, we go to the index, for example, JS here, or a JS file. This way we keep our things clean, our code clean and organized in different files according to the language. If I have inline JavaScript and inline CSS, I will be messing with three languages in the same file, which is not good because, as you can see, the code becomes unreadable. And because if there are more than one developer working on the same code, and if one is working on CSS and another is using or working in JavaScript, we will get in trouble because we're using version control. I will change this line, my colleague will change this line, and then we will commit, both commit on the same file, and we will of course have a conflict. So we try to avoid adding CSS or JavaScript inside the HTML. HTML is just HTML with the attributes that we use to target or style or give certain properties to the elements. So this is why we don't prefer the on-click here. Inside JavaScript, we can use the on-click like, let me see if I have the parent element. No, I don't have the parent element. So document query selector parent. I'm creating a variable to hold this element. And now instead of using the add event listener, I'm using the much shorter on click. So I say on click equals, as I'm assigning a function, it's a property. So I'm assigning a value, which is a function always. And I'm going to say console log parent 1. Now, I will see a couple of messages. So let me see if now we have a lot of what's going on. We have parent. Okay. Why I don't see the parent? Okay, I will just remove the rest of the event listeners for now. I will use a trick. I will leave it for you to figure out. So I'm just disabling these two, and let's see if this works. Okay, so I have the parent element, I put the on-click property, I assign a function to it, and it works pretty much the same as the add event listener. Whenever the click event bubbles up to this element, to the parent, the function console log parent1 is displayed. Now, at this point, can somebody tell me what the event current target is equal to? If I click parent, what will event current target be? Which exactly the parent. Event current target is always the element left on the add event listener, but also left of the on click. So it's the same thing. Dot on click, dot add event listener, an event handler, an event object, and the event target is always the element with the listener. So also in this case, it's the element with the listener. Now, okay, I want to have this element clicked. And let's say that after 200 lines of code, a colleague of mine comes and tries to add another event listener on the same element. So parent on click a function with displays parent2. Now, what do you think will happen if I click the parent? Which methods do you think will be displayed? Parent2 says Vasos. Let's see. And it's indeed parent2. Now, why this happens is that this is a property, an object property, and we assign a value. So by getting the same property of the same object twice and assigning a value, we're kind of doing this. Let's say it's like we have a variable and we say this equals to 1 and then to 2. This is an assignment operation. So we are assigning a value to this property. This is the same as if we had a variable and we assigned a value. Now, whenever you use the assignment operator again, it means that you are replacing the previous value. So at this point, sum will not have 1 as a value, but 2. This is how assignment works if we use the assignment operator. The previous value is being replaced. So this is the same with the onClick. Instead of a simple variable, we have an object property. Object properties are simply variables that live inside an object, so it's pretty much the same. We assign a value, which is more complex than a number, but it's still a value, it's a function. And then we are assigning, once again, a value to the same variable, to the same object property. So at this point, we're just throwing away this function. So this is why the parent only displays this function. This is just being thrown away. So with this syntax, we cannot add multiple event listeners on the same event on the same element, because once we replace the value, once we assign the value, all previous values are being thrown away, and we will only left with this last value. Now, so the solution to this is that we switch from the onClick syntax. So I will say this will replace the previous value of onClick. Okay. So we will not get what we want, but I will comment this for now. If I use parent add event listener, twice or even more times, I can put as many event listeners as I want on the same element. Okay. So let's refresh. I can see both event handlers happening, but here the order in which I write the commands. So you've seen I've written this add event listener first, and then this one second. This is where order matters. So when we have an event listener on the same event, on the same element, the order in which these event listeners appear in the code do matter. So if I place this code here and I run the click again, you will see parent2 and then parent1. So I can run multiple event listeners on the same element, on the same event, or even on different events. But if I'm using the same event listener on the same event, the order in which I write these commands, these lines of code, do make a difference in how this code will get executed. This is like the first one gets executed first, then the second, then the third, and so on. So I think, response to Armando's question, the answer is to use the event listener always. As a best practice, I believe that you can safely forget all about on-click or the on and event name syntax and use the add event listener. The only case where we are going to get reintroduced to the on-click syntax or to the on-event syntax is when we get to see JavaScript frameworks such as React. But that's a different topic and a different framework and almost a different language. So we will see that later on. But for now, keep in mind that this is the preferred syntax for adding event listeners. Patrick Chan also placed a description for event target. And I think this is really nice. So what is the difference between target and and current target? And Patrick pasted this really nice explanation, like event target is the element that triggers the event. This is where we click, we hit the click, and event current target is always the element with the event listener. So yes, thank you, Patrick. That's like the short description of these two properties. So this is why we tend not to use the on-click syntax. Questions, anything to try? Anything bugging you, like what would happen if this happened, or something to try, or we can play around with the code and try to understand better the events by trying different things. So in case you want to try something and explain how and why that happens, this is the time. Okay, so let's move on to the parameters, the options, let's say the settings that we can apply to event listeners. So for now, we have been using the event listener with only the first and the second argument, which are mandatory. We need to describe the event that we want to listen on, and of course a callback function that we want to execute when this event happens. But there is also the options object. There's a third parameter which allows us to add some extra functionality to the event listeners. So let's head to our favorite documentation. Let's search for MDN. And we'll see that the event target method add event listener sets up a function that will be called whenever the specified event is delivered to the target. I think this is a pretty nice description. So it's delivered to the target because the specified event accesses a route, is going through the event propagation. So we have the specified event is something like a package, as I mentioned. We start from the top, it goes through it walks through the DOM structure and then it gets delivered to the target. So that's why it says the specified event is delivered to the target. It's very close to what we saw, how this concept, let's say, work. And right here we see that we have the syntax. So we have two parameters, which is the type of the event and the listener, or I think this should be handler. I think I will change this. This is the handler. I believe it's, the name is not, I would prefer handler anyway. And then these parameters, as you know, mean that are mandatory. Whenever we see the parameter names like this in the MDN, and below we can see what these parameters are actually, how we actually provide the value and what they do. But whenever a parameter is placed inside brackets, it means that it's an optional parameter. We can omit this parameter. And you can see there are different syntaxes for this add event listener with the options object and the use capture and different parameters. But right now we're going to focus on the third parameter. And if we go here, we will see that this is options. This is optional, not because it says option, but because it's a parameter that we can omit. And it's an object which specifies characteristics about the event listener. Here are the options that we can use. Okay, we can use these object properties, and each property and option property defines what this will do and how it will change the behavior of the event listener. Don't go right now here to read. You don't have to read this. We will explain about the once and the capture options parameters. So let's go back to our example. There's a question. Sometimes you see the word false at the end of the event listener. Could you explain this concept? So Patrick says that sometimes we see add event listener I think, let me know, Patrick, is that you see this syntax.
Yeah.
Okay. You get an element, add event listener, the event type, and the handler, and of course the false. In case the false is a simple Boolean value, then this means this is the third parameter to add event listener. And this reflects the use capture parameter. So if the third parameter is a Boolean, it means that we are not using the options. We are not using an options because the option is an object. We must use an object, a JavaScript object. If we see the false, it means that we are using the third parameter, which is also optional, as a Boolean. And it says a Boolean indicating whether events of this type will be dispatched to the register listener before dispatch, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I think this is too complicated for now. We will explain this with a simpler example. So when you see false, it's this parameter, okay, just to make it clear. And the default value is false. So whenever you see false at the end of a add event listener, it's actually you're actually placing a value which you could pretty much omit, because the default value, the default third value is false. So you can just forget about false. You will only need to place a third parameter as a Boolean if you want to use the true as a value, the Boolean true, because the false is the default value. So fault is just, I don't know, unnecessary there. I will skip this one because I want to focus on these two, which is this capture is similar to use capture. So it's a different ways to assign this value. So I'll just focus on these two. So I will first place a parameter here. So as you can see, we have the first argument, the second argument to add event listener, and this is where we place either the options parameter or the Boolean use capture. So at this point, as the third parameter, I only need to place either a Boolean, a true or false, or an option object. We will use the object format syntax for now, which actually covers the use capture case in a, I think, better fashion. So you can even forget about use capture because everything we can do with use capture, we can do it with the options object. So for this, I will show you the first very easy option, which is the once option. Now, if I go back to the documentation, you will see that the once option inside the options object has a default value of false. So I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing. Since this is the default value, I'm just writing more code than is needed. So I will just use this to show the value, the initial default value. So what happens when I have the default value once false? Every time I click the parent, this event listener will get triggered and this parent one will be displayed here. Okay. If I choose to turn the ones from the default value false to true, it will just run this event listener once, simply. So I click on parent, let me refresh. Okay, and I see parent 2, parent 1. If I click again on parent, I will only see the previous event listener running. This one has just been destroyed. So the once parameter in the third object argument here allows the event listener to run only once. So the event listener listens for the event, it triggers the event handler, and then destroys itself completely. So there's no event listener after the first click or the first mouse enter or whatever you want. So just run the handler once and remove the listener. Let me know if you need to talk more about this parameter. So when I say handler or event handler, I'm actually referring to this argument. The second argument I place to. So this is the handler here, or It's the function that will be called when the event happens on this element. So handler or event handler is, when I say event handler or handler, I'm referring to this function. Um, Patrick says, do you add semicolon after true, or is it unnecessary in an object? So let's go back to the code. So Patrick, you mean here, like this? No, no, we never do that. Inside objects, we do not put the semicolon. It's, as you can see, it breaks the code. We will only put a comma when we want to add another object property. For example, when we want a second property. So no, never. We just put the value here, the property value, and then a comma if there's a next property after that. But no, the semicolon here will break the code.
I have a quick question.
Mhm.
So if we want to make a click on an element and not that it's a child from another element, and we don't want that the parent element also gives us its function back, do we ask that in the third, like now in our third parameter, or we do something like what we did before with if this is not the target, then please not run the function.
Mm-hmm. So I think the best approach, or at least the first approach, would be to use what we did. For example, if we have an event listener on the body and on the child, or most of the times we're working on some code that already has a listener on the body and the child, it means that someone put these listeners there for a reason, okay? Or if we place the listeners there, it means that we really want the body and the child to listen on this event. So in this case, we need to use some conditional logic and see whether at each listener and at each element, we want to execute some kind of function. So I think the first approach would be to use some kind of conditionals there to see whether we want some code to be executed. Just like we did when we checked whether the current target is the same as the target on the body. Now, if for some reason I want to stop this propagation, so let me clear this thing up a little bit. Let's make this. So we saw how the propagation works all the way in these two directions. Now, what if at some point I want to stop this process? We can stop this process at any point, okay? For example, I might put here a command which is called event stop propagation. Now these are commands propagation, and we will see it in action. It's a function, okay? It's a function or method, and this will stop the event propagation from going upwards at this point. So at any point of this event propagation, I can stop this process by using the event stop propagation. So here, if I put a stop propagation here at the child or at the button, this will not happen. Okay, I'm stopping the propagation here. I can even stop it here, or here, or here, or here, or anywhere during the process. So if for some reason I want to stop an event from either bubbling up or continuing through the capturing phase, at that point I can run this command, of course, inside an event handler, because it's the place that I have the event available to me. And then this will stop the process of going up. So let's see how, for example, right now, let's enable this right now. And I will try now. We have a lot of. Okay, let's see. I think maybe we need to clear. So we have parent body clicked. So, okay. Let's see. We have parent child click. Okay, I'll just comment them. I'll just comment these two. Just to work with a little bit less code. You'll uncomment them and test them and play with them on your own. So right now I have the child, which, as you remembered, triggers the event propagation of the click event, goes from body, parent, child, then child, parent, body, and at some point it reaches the bubbling phase of the body. Okay? So if at the point where the event is at this point, at the child, if I want to stop the event propagation, at this point, I can run the event stop propagation and stop the process of the event propagation further up the chain. Or I can even stop the propagation earlier during the capturing phase. So let's see how we can stop this propagation once the event is here at the child. So here inside the child, I will also clear. Let's see more of the code. Okay, so let's see what happens right now. So we have a click event that goes over here and up to the body. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stops for this route, let's say. Now, if I run the command stop propagation here, okay, all these will be removed. All this will never happen. Okay, I can stop the propagation of the event onwards. And let's do that by going on the child event listener and say stop propagation. Now I will refresh and clear the console. So the event hits the child. Okay, it propagates up to the child. The listener triggers the handler. The handler displays the console, the child, sorry, clicked. And then we stop the propagation. So at this point, after the console log, we say, okay, stop going up. In a way, we are destroying the event right here. So this is a way that we can, let's say, get inside this propagation road, this propagation process, and at some point stop this from continuing on. We can stop this at any point, here, 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 or anywhere we want. We just need an event listener at that point, and we need to run the event stop propagation. Now, Nikos of course, asks why should we do this? Is this needed, and in which case? So to be, let's say, more uh, to be honest, we don't use this propagation very often. We rarely use it. So now, when should the case be that we use it? For right now, I don't have like a concrete example in my mind. There are rare cases where we might want to stop the propagation. Uh, I don't have an example, a real example in mind. So this is quite a rare phenomenon. You won't see the stop propagation used often. The one thing is that it's a rare occasion where we will need to use it. And the second most important fact about stop propagation is that we have to be very, very careful when using it. Because as I said, for some reason, let's clear this. For some reason, I'm working on the child button and I want to do stuff with the child and I see this annoying body clicked. And I say, okay, let's stop the propagation. I don't want my event to hit the body. But someone placed that event listener on the body for a reason. So if I put the stop propagation, I'm actually breaking the code that someone else placed there on the body. So in order to use the stop propagation, it means that I must be very, very sure about um, about this execution, about not worrying about the body listener. If I have a listener somewhere on an element and this gets triggered through the propagation process, it means that someone put that listener for a reason. So if I'm working in a code along with other coders, uh, it should probably be a good idea never to use stop propagation because this might break somebody else's code. Or at least if I'm in the case where I have to stop the propagation, I don't want something triggered in this process. I would have to talk with the other developers and discuss whether and why they might have put this body listener and how we can deal with this situation in a different manner. So in most cases, we just have to deal with conditionals or some kind of other um, uh, solutions. And honestly, I cannot think right now for an example because Uh, I don't think I ever needed to use this, but you might find it at some place. So this is a very, let's say, dangerous command, and we should be very careful when we use it. And it can happen on all of the all along the event propagation. At any point, we can stop this propagation using stop propagation. Now, let's see uh, how we can listen on an event. So as we talked earlier, let's maybe clean this a bit. No, okay, okay. I will make a quick rough sketch. So we have this element and this element, and we have the capturing phase and the bubbling phase and the events that go here and then go here and then go here and then they leave. Or as you show in the diagram of the documentation, It goes through the HTML, the document, the window object, and then it reaches the end of this propagation. And right now we saw that when we add an event listener on, let's say, the body, the event gets triggered when it reaches the bubbling phase. So on step 4, let's say, one might ask if and whether we can trigger the listener, or we can set the listener to listen on the click event, okay, some kind of event, but on the capturing phase. So we know that by default the listener works on this side, but how about this side? How about when we click on the green button, we can catch the event at this point on the body, not here. So can we detect the event at this point? And the answer, of course, is yes. We can detect the event on the capturing phase, so going downwards, if we use the options once again here and set the capture to true. So let's see this in action. So as you remember, I've placed a stop propagation here. So it means that I was stopping the event here, okay? This is the stop propagation. So the event will move here, 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 and it will stop here. Okay, so I will see the child click, but I wouldn't see the body clicked. But right now, the event listener, let's give it a different color. The event listener is not placed on the capturing phase, on the bubbling phase, but it's actually placed on the capturing phase. So this capture true means that I want to catch the event click not on the way up, but on the way down, which means it will be caught earlier than when it hits the child. It will be the first, let's say, step in our diagram. So let's check this. Let's refresh and click. So as you can see now, I see a different result. I see body clicked and then child click. Why? Because the event started here. It started on the window, it went to the HTML document, it reached the body, and this is where the event listener got triggered. It went down to parent, child, child click, and then the propagation stopped and never reached parent or body on the way up. So with the capture true, we can trigger, we can listen on the event, but on the way down, so earlier on, not on the way up. And this is a case where we might want to change the code depending on whether we want this relation or this thing to happen on the way up or on the way down. Patrick asks, if you remove line 17, you will have another body clicked and another child clicked. So now, Patrick says, what if I comment the stop propagation here? It means that if I don't stop the propagation here, the event will move upwards and reach the parent and the body again. So if I remove this line, the propagation will continue. So yes, I will have another click event on the body, but I will not see a message because I don't have an event listener right now on the body, on the bubbling phase. I have only one listener, this one, which only listens on the capturing phase. I cannot have an event listener listening both on the capture and the bubbling phase. I can either have one or the other. So by default, it listens on the bubble phase. With a capture true, it listens on the capturing phase. If I want to see the click event on the body, both on the capture and the bubbling phase, I must create another listener on the body, but this time with a capture set to false or not put this option here at all. And then I will first catch the event on the capturing phase, then the child, and then I will capture the body click on the bubbling phase. Uh, so I cannot get the importance of the body being clicked since we target the client. Um, so before moving on, I will just want to check. Uh, wait, okay. So it's been some time since I've used this, but if I replace the option object with child clicked, okay, let me see, I body clicked. So when I use the Boolean, when, as Patrick mentioned, we see a Boolean here, the true or false, we're actually using this in a different syntax. So when we see false, just false, not an object, it's capture false. And when we see true, it's actually this syntax, capture isn't true. So the false that you see, Patrick, it's actually a capture with the value of false. And I think you should prefer the syntax because not only it covers the capturing option, but it also has the ones and other options too. So it's better to use this. Um, so Armando has another question. I cannot get the importance of the body being clicked since we target the child. So Armando says, okay, since we only are interested in the child, why should the body be clicked? This is a really nice question. And I think the way you should be thinking about this, about why this happens, is because, as I mentioned earlier, is something like closely, let's say, related to physics. For example, when outside in nature, okay, if I apply pressure on, let's say, the table, both the table and the cloth and the paper get the pressure applied to them. It's not because of a reason, it's because of the way they work, okay? So you can think of this condition happening, this clicking, this event propagation, because it just is the way of things work. And they made this work this way because we are actually clicking on all these elements. For example, the child is inside the parent, which is inside the body. So we need to have this kind of event propagation because we really want to get the whole picture, like in overall which and how many elements were part of this event process. So it's actually how things work in the world of events in the DOM. Um, and you will see this, the importance of this. Okay, in the next example. Before moving on, because I'm going to clear this example and make something simpler to work and talk on this on the next topic. Let me know if you want to try anything else on this code or explain anything. And so I will create a file. and I will call it events. I will place everything there so that you have this code there. Of course, when you download the code, you will uncomment these sections, play around, because I commented a lot of the sections, and you can try like stop propagation. So I will remove this one, and I will also, let's say, remove these two. So right now, I think this will answer Armando's question in more detail. So I will replace the article with a button. I'm just replacing the element with a button, and I will say answer A and answer B. So I'm using two buttons instead of an article, and I'm going to remove the padding, and I'm going to remove this. I think okay. Let's make it like this. So let's move the code here. So this is the structure right now. So you can see like here. And I have two buttons. Now, here's why I think I hurried to answer Armando's question, but I think this is the real answer. So this is not why this happens. I told you, you can think this is how it works, but this is how where it is useful. Okay, so now I will show you where it is useful to use this event propagation. So let's say that I have these two buttons, and I want these buttons to get triggered. And let's use an ID. So I will say, let's get button with ID A. Okay. So since I have two buttons, and add event listener, click, and handle click A. I will now give a external function. I will declare a function called handle click A, and console log A. So let's say I'm trying to figure out how to create a game. I'm using query selector to get the element. I'm attaching an event listener on the click. I'm defining the event handler or handler, which is this function. And then when I hit this button, I see the result in the console. Now, let's say that I need, for example, while I click on the, let's say I create another button, button update. Let's say I create another button. Okay, here, that will update the buttons and the content of these answer boxes. So what I do is I say when the user clicks the button with ID update or just the ID update, Let's add an event listener and run some kind of code that will update the content of this area, which is the parent. So right now the parent HTML content is these two lines, okay? And let's say I want to replace it with some, let's say, a third answer. So what I want to do is when I click here, I will get a third answer button. So I say, okay, let's get the document with class parent and change the HTML to a string. The inner HTML always accepts a string. I'm using the backticks or template literal syntax to write a big string with spanning multiple lines. And let's say I want to change this answer to be C. I want the answer A to be the same, let's say, but once I hit update, I want this to change to C. But let's see what happens when I do this. I will refresh. So I click on answer and I get the event. Okay, now let's update. Okay, answer C is updated, the answer 1 is updated but with the same content. And now I hit update, but nothing happens. Now, why does this happen? And the reason why this happens is because when I use the inner HTML and the assignment operator, everything that was inside gets replaced. So all these elements are thrown away along with the corresponding references on JavaScript. So when I remove or destroy an element from the DOM using various methods, with inner HTML is one, the reference I have to this element in JavaScript, like right here, okay, this is a reference to this element. So when this gets thrown away, this reference also gets to reference a null value, nothing. Now this document query selector just points to nothing, okay? Because with the assignment operator, the content and the two elements were removed and replaced with two different elements, button A and button C, which of course do not have any event handler on them. So I get the element, I assign an event listener, and it works. When I use the inner HTML, I replace the content, the elements are thrown away, this thing breaks, okay? This thing stops working once I use the inner HTML, and then we replace the content with some other content. Now, if at this point I want answer A still to have an event listener, I must redeclare, I must run this code again at the point where I update the HTML. So at this point, since I'm destroying button A and I'm recreating it, and by destroying button A, I'm also destroying the event listener, I have to again redeclare, find again the button A or the button C and add a listener. So in the case where I update and destroy the element and recreate it, I have also to recreate the connection between an event listener. So in this case, I have to go through the process of uh, adding an event listener again and again and again. And of course, this might seem easy with a single element, but with what if I have different and a lot of elements? So in order to do that, we use a very nice approach and smart approach, which is called, and this is the last term you will see today, event delegation. You should search for the definition of the word delegation in English and also see it in your native language to get a better understanding of why this word was picked and selected and understand better what we're trying to do. So event delegation is just a trick we use, a pattern, let's say, to um, to find a solution for this problem. So when we remove elements from here, we also remove the event listeners. If we add elements, for example, if I add another button, a third, a fourth, fifth element, I still have to add event listeners to these elements because I want the user to give me one, two, or I don't know, one of the answers that I want. And this means I have to repeat myself and work with a lot of event listeners and add a lot of event listeners. And we must know that event listeners are really costly. They cost memory, they cost processing units, and they cost even battery, let's say. So we need to limit the number of event listeners. So how can we do that? How can we have, let's say, I will create another button here. How, from what we learn, how can we use the knowledge that we have, the propagation, all of these things, in order to limit the event listeners? Now, instead of having 3 event listeners for answer A, B, and D, can I use a trick to have like a single event listener for all of them? A for loop. Okay, what would the for loop do, Chetin?
It will loop through each button to give
Mhm,
an listener.
mhm,
And yeah, if I define a variable to
mhm,
each one of them, maybe it can work, but I'm not sure. I'm
mhm.
just guessing.
Yeah, yeah, sure. That's what I want to hear now. Guesses. So Cetin says that okay, we can loop over the elements and assign an event listener, but that means that we will have 3 event listeners. What we are trying now to do is find a solution that will react to answer A, answer B, answer D with a single, only one event listener. So Elvis is a for each loop, and all these answers or guesses or ideas with for loops and for each means that we will loop and add an event listener 1, 2, 3 times. But right now we're trying to see if we can deal with this with one single event listener. Do you think we can do it with what we've learned so far?
Uh, we could make the two answers the parent element, but this we will destroy our code. Maybe.
Let's keep the markup like it is right now. We don't want to change the markup, the HTML. We just want to work on the JavaScript for the solution. So we want a single event listener to get activated on each of these button clicks. But one single event listener, not three, but one. The key here is the event propagation that happens. Remember that when we click on an element, we're not only clicking on this specific element, we're at the same time clicking on other elements also that are nested or are parent elements. So can we add an event listener or an element and then be able to catch the clicks of these three elements? Patrick says have the buttons on different layers. So for the sake of this argument and this example, let's say that this is the HTML that we're given. The client does not want this markup to change. So we have just a parent div with three buttons. They just want us to find a solution with a single event listener. Let me help you with. So a click event on the answer one will go this way. A click event on the answer B will go this way, and a click event on the answer D will go this way. So can we have a single event listener that can detect all three elements? Is there an element or a listener that knows when either of these clicks get triggered? The update. Can I put an event listener on an element and have it know whenever answer A or B or D is clicked? Which element is behind these three buttons? Exactly, the parent. Since the parent gets the event of all these three buttons here, when the event propagation happens on the answer A, the click event will reach the parent. When the event propagation happens on the answer B, it will reach the parent. When the event propagation happens on the answer D, it will reach the parent. So the parent always know when one of its children or one of the child gets triggered. So if we place a listener here, listener anyway, the listener on the parent element will always detect answer A, answer B, and answer D. So this is our solution. Instead of three add event listeners here, okay, 1, 2, 3, we place a single one here, and we know about everything that happens in one of its children. So this thing is how we use the term event delegation. The main listener delegates these various events of various elements. So we'll just place an event listener here, and then we will catch all these three events. So once I hit answer A, I will get a click here, and the event handler will get executed. Once I hit answer B, I will also get a click, and when I get answer D, I will also get a click. So three clicks, three different buttons, one click on the event listener. But how? Or let's work on the code for this one, and we'll go through the next question. So in order to do this, I have to get the parent, and add an event listener on the click. Since it is below the buttons, we will always get this triggered. So answer A, answer B, answer D. Whenever I hit one of these buttons, the event actually propagates back to the parent, and it always gets triggered through the event listener. So I see the sum button inside anytime I hit one of these. Let's just comment this right now. So one stone, three birds. But right now, as you can see, I get a single event listener to catch 3 click events from 3 different buttons, but I need to know which answer the user clicked. So how can I check whether the user clicked on answer A, answer B, or answer D? What do you think? Inside here, I know that the button was clicked, but how do I know which button was clicked? Exactly. Patrick says we no longer need to worry about which button. With us, we'll say event target, which is E. This is the identification, the ID of the element that triggered the event. So if I rerun my code, perfect. Child D, child B, again child B, child A, child B, child D, and so on. So just by using event target, we can see which button was clicked and give a different, let's say, result to the user. For example, let's say that answer A is the correct answer. How can I check? For example, I know that I have the target, the element, but I want to check if the button that was clicked is the one that contains, let's say, ID B, A, or D. How can I get the ID value of this element? Dot ID is 1, yes. So let's try this. So yes, I can get the answer. Now all I need is a simple conditional to check if and I'm ready to create my Trivial Pursuit game. So I click answer D and I lose. I click answer B and I lose. I click answer A and I win. But just a minor modification. Although this ID property is available on all the HTML elements and it gives us the ID, I prefer to use the get attribute. So the same thing with a little bit of a better, let's say, and safer way. The ID works on almost all browsers, I think on all browsers, but just to keep things like really safe, we can do this. Uh, Patrick asks if event target is event target an object type. Okay, so why don't we say console log type of target? Let's console log the type, shall we? Okay, where is it's an object. Questions? So let me show you an example of where event delegation really, really shines and where it saves us a lot of um, memory and resources. Let me clear this one. Okay, I will. Oh, come on. Zoom is a little bit annoying sometimes. So I will open a Google spreadsheet. In case you haven't used, is the Google Sheet is the, let's say, free Google version of Microsoft's Excel spreadsheet program. So it's a spreadsheet program where we can keep track of, let's say, the student progress. So I will say Aliki, let's say lesson 34, and Patrick, lesson 35. Okay, it's just a program. Okay, and this is a web page. Okay, this is a web application. This is just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And this big table where we can write anything we want anywhere. And as you can see, as I write, this gets updated. So there's a lot of functionality going on. So this is a web page. And since these cells are, we can interact with these cells, this means that all of these elements have event listeners. Okay, when we interact with elements in the page and we see things like, colors changing, values appearing somewhere, double clicking, seeing a border, all these elements are elements with event listeners. Now, let's see how many elements we have. We have about 1,000 rows and about 24 columns, which makes up 24,000 elements. Now, if we wanted to create 24,000 event listeners for each and every one of these small elements, our browser will stop working. Okay, this would be a great, like an excessive amount of memory and event listeners. So instead of adding an event listener for all these thousands of these elements, Google has added an event listener on the main object, let's say this element that contains all these 1,000 cells. And every time we click somewhere or we change some cell, this one single listener gets triggered, and depending on the ID of the cell or some other attribute, it knows which one is triggered and does its thing. So this is a case where, let's say, you are asked to create something like this, an interactive table, a spreadsheet. You would, of course, go and loop over with for each and add an event listener for all of these elements. You would just find a parent element and attach an event listener just on that parent element. So this is where event delegation and event propagation really help us build these applications. If it wasn't for event propagation and delegation, I don't think these kind of applications would be feasible and maintainable and also able to run on a browser. So this is where we see the power of what we've learned. So questions? Uh, you have to watch through the video again, write a lot of code, and play around with these things that we've learned. And I have to say that asynchronous programming and events are the most crucial concepts in front-end development. If you don't master these concepts, you will never become a front-end developer. They are difficult, they are very difficult and confusing, so don't get overwhelmed or discouraged. Um, Everybody passed through the phase of what the hell is this thing doing and why is this working this way. We just need to write code, a lot of code. But they're very, very important because everything we do on the web, it has to do with events. It goes through the events. Okay, you never open a page and just read through the page. You always interact with the page. There's at least a button or some kind of form or some kind of thing happening with the page. So these are probably the most important concepts and you should be familiar with. And I will give you an exercise so that you can practice. So I will give you, I will send this zip file on the Slack channel. Let me go through. Come on, Zoom. Oh my God. Sometimes it's so frustrating. So I will give you the trivia quiz and I will show it to you. I will open it. So it's just a simple page. And it's just a simple HTML and I want you, it's a trivia quiz. So I want you to apply the things that you've learned with the event delegation and the event propagation and make this a quiz that will prove whether the user has clicked on the right answer or not. So you will add some JavaScript and when the user clicks the right answer, there will be something displayed. Preferably, it would be nice to show like a green color, make this answer change, let's say to green if it's the correct, or make it red when it's not the correct. And also make this quiz run only once, okay? So I don't want the user to do this because this will be cheating. Once I've clicked an answer, I don't want any more interaction. I want this listener to be able either red or green and see somewhere an answer like you're correct, you're not correct, or something else. So you have to apply everything you've learned in this example, and I will be updating you will be sending me the file, the zip file with the answer, and I will be updating the GitHub with exercises at a later moment. So just send me the zip. Patrick asks if we need to do the register. I'm not sure I get your question. Yes, you're right. Yeah, I mean, some of you left. I took a screenshot of you earlier, so yeah, you can just